Hello, and thank you for being here to listen to my speech. Today I will be teaching you about sexism. We cannot achieve true justice until we eradicate sexism in every way of society. Let's stand together and demand change. Sexism isn't just a woman's issue, it's a barrier in progress within and for all of us. By the end of my speech, my audience will know about sexism, what it is, how to identify it, and how it can affect them in everyday life. What is sexism? According to Britannica, sexism is prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination typically against women on the basis of sex. Sexism is something that has always been present in our society. It's where usually men will have more rights than women. One example of sexism is when women didn't have the ability to vote until 1920, while men had been voting for years before that. Now that I've described what sexism is, let me provide you with some keys on how to identify sexism. There are two main issues of sexism. One of them is gender stereotypes, and the other one is unequal treatment. Here's an example of sexism in a workplace. This is Deborah's story. Deborah was a bus driver, and she had just recently gotten a new job to drive buses. After doing a week's worth of training, she was fully qualified to drive buses, but her boss kept making these weird comments about how she might not be as qualified, and then they would just laugh it off. After a while, Deborah said that enough was enough, and that she was going to figure out why he kept making these comments towards her. Well, to make a long story short, it was because she was a woman, and there was no other things to it. She was just as qualified as everybody else to have the same job, but Deborah wasn't going to stand for that. So Deborah quit and found a better paying job. Learning and being aware of sexism is an important part of life because it can keep you from being discriminated against. Now on to how sexism affects everyday life. Sexism will always be here, unfortunately. It's something that was here long before us, and it's going to be something that's here long after us. That is because people are usually trying so hard to force these type of gender norms, and they're just so afraid of change and new things happening. Other things to think about when it comes to sexism is misogyny, feminism, and sexual harassment. These are three main things that relate to sexism from Kurostada in 2017. Sexism can have a terrible effect on people. They can do one of two things. They will either turn somebody else into a sexist because of the trauma and experiences they've had in the past, or it will make somebody cower down so bad that they are a shell of themselves. I have explained to you what sexism is, how to identify it, and how it can affect you in everyday life. It is very important to be able to identify sexism because if you don't, you might have the chance of being discriminated against. Thank you for listening to my speech.